Welcome to Beyond the Reformer, the podcast where those who love Pilates come together for thoughtful conversations, genuine insights, and inspiring stories. I'm your host, Nick Lenny, and through these chats, I hope you feel more connected to our community, more aligned in your purpose, and inspired both in your Pilates journey and beyond. In today's episode, I'm joined by Heba, a two-time Olympic synchronized swimmer turned Pilates educator and creator of the Neuro Pilates method. We delve into her transition from elite athletics to pioneering brain-based movement education and how she's reshaping the Pilates landscape in the Middle East and beyond. Whether you're a teacher, studio owner, or a Pilates enthusiast, Heba's insights are sure to inspire and inform. Let's dive in. Heba, it is such a pleasure to have you on the podcast today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Nick, for the opportunity, and it's wonderful to see you again.
Well, we met a number of years ago, didn't we? Because the very first time I ever did Pilates, I had a physio who said, you should try Pilates, it's going to really help you. I then looked up for it, found a Pilates class in a gym, and it was you. And then I fell in love with it, and I remember falling in love with it. So I remember those classes really well. And then a bit later, we had a studio then. There was a studio that you were teaching in.
Yeah, I remember you were one of those special clients that actually listened to cues and applied them.
I think I was just blown away from, I can remember what the studio looked like. I can remember it so much because I've talked a lot about this. There was something magical in this, the depth of the cueing and slowing down and noticing your body in a different way. And I had never experienced anything like that before.
It helped you a lot with your pain, I remember, right?
Hugely. And then I got interested in, what is Pilates, found a reformer studio. We're so lucky in Leeds where we were. We had this big community of Pilates teachers. But I had this reformer studio, you taught there. And then every now and again, you'd get one of those quiet classes and you'd open up the doors at the back of the studio where the private room was. And me and she's still my Pilates friend now. I still see her sometimes. We always used to go in and you would put us on the trapeze table and on the barrel. And it was like this playground of fun.
Yeah. It was an amazing community, actually. It was funny. I saw Claire Sparrow at PMA. We were both presenting in Vegas, and it was just such a nice uniting. And we both said that first, that time, those instructors, everybody constantly learning and going on courses and encouraging each other to do the same. I've not experienced that since, I didn't realize that most instructors tend to just stay after their initial certification, that's it.
I know. It's something that in my teacher training, I really try and get people to, it's just the beginning, because I then moved in 2013, I moved from Leeds to Bristol where I am now. And there were no studios. I still worked in marketing. I wasn't a teacher by that point, but I had got through my corporate career by coming and doing Pilates almost every lunchtime was my sort of mental and physical reset. And then I came here and there was nothing. And yet in Leeds, there'd just been so much. It just baffled me, really.
Yes, it was wonderful, actually. When I saw you on Instagram and saw you that you became an instructor and opened a studio, I knew you were going to, I think already you had decided before I left that you were going to be an instructor. So I wasn't surprised about that, but that you had moved back and that you had opened a studio. I was so proud, actually, and so excited to have found you.
Well, the studio was never really planned. I mean, it was just because I came and was like, well, there's nowhere for me to go. I'm going to have to create something. So I'd love, Heba, to take you back to before the time we met. And what do I need to understand about you to know where you are today? What was your story?
I think the biggest shape of what's helped me in my Pilates career was my synchronized swimming background. That was my sport growing up. It's a very intense sport, as some of you might know. It's like gymnastics, one of these sports where you have to put in so many hours in, and it needs a lot of conditioning and mental toughness and discipline. Discipline, I think, is the biggest thing I took away from the athlete career, to noticing that I'm putting that same work and dedication into everything that I do because it's so programmed in me. Well, you don't have an option. You have to do all this. You have to you have to put in the work to get the output that you want. And I know I'm stating the obvious, but I mean, it was intense, and I feel like that intense training before school, after school, before uni, after uni, all of that training became such an ingrained habit until now. So that's really what made me get everything done in my Pilates career. And in terms of Pilates, that's also where I was introduced to Pilates.
So, how old were you when you first were introduced to it?
No, very late, very actually towards the very final year. We were, because my final thing was Athens 2004, the Olympics there. And our coach was getting into it. She was Russian, and she started to mix it in. And I could feel, I mean, that year we improved a lot anyway because it was a big deal. We were focusing on a big event, but I really felt the centering from Pilates, the emphasis of centering really affected my sensation in the water. You know, in the water, it's like like Pilates. It's so precise. It probably more so because if you're just a slightly bit off in your spine is ever so slightly extended or ever so slightly extra flexed, you lose that balance, right? So you've got to be exactly always in your center. And I really, really felt that effect in the water. So that's kind of what I started to get interested in it. But it was very subtle. Like I didn't know enough about it or hadn't trained enough in it.
I can only imagine competing at the level that you competed. You were in two Olympics. And like you said, the amount of work and discipline that it took to get there. What was your understanding of your body like during those days? Did it help you understand your body?
I was constantly baffled by the body, honestly. Yeah. And that's what led me to go study sports science after I finished all the synchro, because I couldn't understand how is it that we are putting in so much. I say we because I had a twin. We are putting in all these hours of training, really, really intense training, when every time we'd go to competitions and we'd speak to the top ranking, I mean, we were competing 17th place, 18th place, like we were down the rank, like way down, right? And we would be training so hard all year round just to get 15th place instead of 17th place was our biggest like goal, right? And it's such a, looking back now, I'm thinking, gosh, did anyone even really care past the first five? But I what led me to study sports science is I couldn't understand how the top ranking ones were not training actually as much as we were training. The Americans, who were always winning at the time, Russians as well, they were training 6 hours a day. We were training eight, sometimes even 10 in the summer. And we would be sitting in our over splits, 30 minutes for each leg. It took 90 minutes just to get through our split routines. And they were very amused by our splits, especially like, wow, you have to sit there for that long. And it's like they knew a secret that we did it. And I was thinking, oh, do you not do that? Or how are you even way more flexible than we are? And you're not doing this? So then I thought there must be some, you know, roundabout way that we're training, and they're training smarter for sure. And I just wanted to know how.
Is that what drew you to do sports science at Leeds Met?
Yeah, exactly. That's what made me go to Leeds Met to study sports science, and that's where, I started to understand a lot about overtraining, recovery, all the importance of, I mean, we were definitely overtrained, not just us. I mean, the whole culture in Egypt is everybody's doing very, very well at juniors because the kids are training so hard from such an early age, so long hours. They take sport very, very seriously in Egypt, more than other Arab countries for some reason. But then it's suddenly just that's the level where we stay at. There's hardly any noticeable improvement past the junior years in all sports. It's very clear. Basically, I think there's just not enough intelligent training. And when we went to Russia, they said you're supposed to be doing maximum technique, minimum effort. You're doing it the other way around. You're doing maximum effort, minimum technique.
And so you'd done some Pilates as part of that synchronized swimming. When did Pilates teacher training come in? Were you at Leeds Met at that point? Had you finished your course? Where did that come in?
Yeah, it was in the middle of my Leeds Met journey with sports science. I wanted to do something extra to teach, and my friend at the time, who's now my husband, he suggested going to to do a Pilates course in London because he said that seems to be a very hot trend in fitness right now. Obviously, not as trending as it is right now, but at the time, Madonna had made it quite trending. So basically, I decided to go to London and do my teacher training. I had started with the Stott Pilates, which is obviously now called Merrithew. I absolutely loved it at the time.
Because it's interesting you talk about your kind of thoughts around the sports training. And I think Pilates, like one of the principles I always lean back into is it's about efficiency. How can you do it with the least amount of effort, actually? Because if you can live your life like that, then you won't keep burning out, whether that's energetic burnout, but even a burnout of your knee or your hip or your back. How can you make your body super efficient? So it's really interesting kind of hearing that. And did it feel like that for you when you started to understand Pilates a bit more?
Absolutely. Pilates was just really the ABCs of efficiency for me, because you said efficiency, but it really is a perfect word of improving the ABCs of movement. Like I thought I was a good mover, but actually there was a lot of unlearning that had to happen and taking it back. Like I wanted to go very strong very quickly. And I remember my Pilates teacher now telling me to strip it back and really, more subtleties in the movement. I just absolutely love the precision of Pilates, which is something I don't see any other movement disciplines have as much precision as Pilates does. And I know we're often criticized for being too picky and too precise, but then that's what makes Pilates, I think.
It is, isn't it? And it's that you to do that, you have to slow down. And if you slow down, your energetic shift. And so people talk about these transformative effects, not only in their rehab, but in how they feel about themselves, about life. Lots of people I've spoken to on the podcast have talked about their first Pilates class was a catalyst to notice themselves more. And I think that comes through the precision that you're trying to get. You have to slow down and you have to tune in and you have to notice. And of course, that goes so much deeper than just the mechanics of the body, doesn't it?
100%. Yeah, it absolutely does.
And what was that transition like from being an athlete to then being a teacher? Was that something you enjoyed? Did it feel a struggle?
Yeah, I just felt like this is where I'm finding myself, with the sports science that I was doing. And then I was doing the personal training certification on the weekends. It felt like, okay, I'm understanding more about exercise theory and I'm understanding more about the squat and the deadlift and all this. But then Pilates felt more like home for me. Pilates felt like, oh, this is really linked to coaching. And I always felt when I was teaching, it was as if I was coaching synchro. I remember always having to step back and pretend I'm outside the pool looking at all the girls inside and then just wanting to call out names and then remembering, oh, we were told we're not supposed to call out names to correct from afar. But it's so much more efficient when people don't have egos and I could say, Nick, hips down, and you do it rather than constantly being up close and then you don't have enough time to reach everybody by the time it moves over. So I don't know, group classes and that whole vibe, I just felt like, yeah, this feels very, very comfortable, even more than personal training and gym.
So where did you go from then, from being, the Pilates teacher, like for me in the gym and in the studios, to looking at Neuro Pilates? How did that come about?
That was around 2008. Again, my friend who's now my husband, he's very like research geek, right? And we were always trying to go on courses. We were studying together the sports science. We were studying together the personal training. And then he said, I think this is going to be the next big thing. And he was looking at Z Health Performance in Phoenix, Arizona. And then we went and did our first course. Me going blindly, having no idea what this is about, but I just trusted him. I know he's always finding these really niche courses that are really, really great, because I know that he does his research. And going expecting nothing, coming back super mind blown, and then just being obsessed with everything to do with applied neuroscience and neuroanatomy. I remember doing 6 courses a year. It was like we were in debt and everything, but every money I had was just going to this. I remember not caring. Just remember, I'm just too obsessed with it all, and it was just looking at the body through a completely different pair of glasses instead of just the biomechanical one that we were very trained to do up until this point. Like, you know how it is in the Pilates world, particularly with Stop Pilates, they obsess about posture. And that was my background up until this point. I hadn't explored much of other trainings. So the postural analysis was something that we did ingrained, then the movement analysis, the gait analysis, but then it was all through biomechanical lens, and then just starting to look at, okay, now I'm learning posture and gait and movement through a neurological lens, and I'm understanding more what this is telling me about that person's brain and how I can integrate these neurological exercises into the repertoire. I love that.
How did you start bringing it into the repertoire? That must have been, I mean, I remember you coming back from some of those courses and you'd be like, Nick, can we look at this? But, and I was there probably in those very early days when you were doing those courses, but it's really grown now. And I'd love you to explain a little bit more about how you've integrated that and why that's important for people.
Well, I was lucky to have not in the studio you were coming to, but the other one in Chapel So Pilates. I don't know if you remember it,
Yes.
but that was full of older populations, and they absolutely were down for anything. I remember coming excited, doing eye exercises in classes, which I couldn't get away with in the city center, obviously with the younger crowds. But I'd introduce it a bit to when it's a small group like you. But I remember with So Pilates, because they were older clientele there. It was a residential area and they had a lot of aches and pains and stuff. And they were down for all the proprioceptive work that we were doing. They were down for the eye work. They were down for the jaw and the fingers and all the mobilizations we were doing and the toes and the inner ear exercises. They just felt a big difference in their body, and then they're the ones who called it Neuro Pilates, actually. They called my classes. I never called it Neuro Pilates. But when I left Leeds, I was getting emails and text messages saying, "You're loving the new instructor," because I made sure that they had good cover for me when I left. Because by that point, they were family, right? So I was so sad to leave Leeds. But when they were emailing, several of them said, "The new instructor is so great, but we really miss the Neuro Pilates hand exercises and eye exercises you used to do with us." And then I thought, oh, Neuro Pilates, that could be something. And that's why we started. I had moved to Dubai, but that by that point, and in Leeds, I was already doing teacher training with So Pilates, sort of on the weekends only. And then I just continued doing that here in Dubai, setting up my own company for teacher training because I realized that's what I love the most.
Yes, I didn't realize you did teacher training when you were in Leeds. So that kind of came about. And were you already integrating the Neuro Pilates as it ended up being called? I love that the clients named it that. I mean, I imagine you were just integrating it into what you were teaching anyway.
Yeah, just in the regular classes, but not in the teacher training. I was so terrified teaching the teacher training as a beginner. I kind of got a little thrown in the deep end there, but I'm glad I did, because, she said to me, you have to teach, because I think I was the only one who had a level 4, and that was the requirement or something. And then I had to go ahead and teach it. And then I remember being thrown in the deep end saying, oh, you have to teach anatomy and physiology in a few months. And then I thought, okay, I've got to really know this stuff and study it. So basically, I was so terrified. I definitely wasn't integrating anything but the standard curriculum. But then by the time I moved away from Leeds, by that point, I was already used to, I had done a few rounds. I think I had done maybe 3 or 4 groups. So when I came to Dubai, I realized, I am going to still teach classes, but on the weekends, I'd like to also do teacher trainings, and there's just none around. There were some, but it's, how it is with the politics and Pilates. Oh, if to teach for us, you have to have done all of our training, not just this, and this. You have to have done the whole thing. And I had been, at that point, I had trained with different companies, not necessarily sticking with one. So then we just went with government accreditation, Active IQ, and then PMA now, Pilates Method Alliance accreditation after that, because people here care about the American stamp as well.
And we'll talk about your teacher training in a moment. Just before we do, I'd love to understand what differences have you seen, like maybe in your own body, but also in your clients through that Neuro Pilates work?
Yeah, basically, for me, the biggest difference is understanding that the body is a lot more complex and that there's so many multiple reasons for something. So if I have shoulder pain, my old biomechanical self might have thought, oh, it's bicep tendonitis because my shoulder is sitting more forward on that side and that tendon's getting irritated, or the supraspinatus, or whichever tendon is being irritated and avoids me doing this, right? But then having the understanding about pathways, neuroanatomical pathways, understanding, oh, my right shoulder is sitting forward. Who tells it to sit forward? Which part of the brain is commanding that? The right brainstem is commanding my shoulder to sit forward. And the muscles, I'm not going to get anywhere by doing this. I could force it, but we know by now that the muscles don't have the power to change. They're just slaves to what is being commanded of them by the nervous system, right? So the muscles and the tissues, everything. So then I understood, okay, the right brainstem is not doing its job properly, therefore it's making the shoulder sit forward, because the right brainstem makes my shoulder go here, right? So my shoulder is here, the tendon's probably irritated, there's probably some inflammation, but who is commanding that? The right brainstem. Who feeds the right brainstem? The left cerebellum and the left body. So now, one of the biggest changes, just to use this as an example, is instead of thinking biomechanically, and I've got to do this with my shoulder to get that to sit back, to work these muscles to get it to sit back, I know that no, actually, to get my shoulder to sit back, I also have another approach. We could be actually doing more left-sided work, more coordination work on my left side, more balance work on my left side that's going to feed my left cerebellum, which feeds my right brainstem, which controls my posture on the right side.
I just love the sort of depth that the more you learn, the more we realize we don't really know very much. And that's a really powerful and beautiful place to be. We are so beautifully complex as species that let's not just simplify it into, like you said, engage a muscle, pull it back, and think that that's going to fix what is could be a chronic, and often is a chronic problem for somebody. But it's really interesting to have the depth of knowledge that you have now around how the brain works, how it's firing, how that gets your brain thinking as the teacher to support that client to actually help them be more balanced, because I guess you get the balance in the body, but you're doing it through the balance in their brain, which is fascinating. And so I guess you've got that understanding of like that. And then I know I've seen you on Instagram, doing these really cool drills where, doing things like you said, things with your eyes. What are they doing? When we do those kind of eye exercises and you take some of the Pilates movements and you just put them through a different lens, and it is fascinating.
Well, I'm trying as much as I can to make it all about neuroanatomy, right? Because the problem also with the neuro community, just like I'm sure it exists in every community of focus in the body, whether that's fascia or viscera or anything. There's a lot of videos and stuff, and I hope I don't come across like that, which is do this eye exercise and then test your pain and see if it goes away, because there's tons of that, which I think makes the whole neuro community seem very gimmicky. And I always try to use my language very, very carefully, which is do this eye exercise and it may help your pain because of this pathway and that pathway. You know what I mean? Because we are, as you said, incredibly complex, and people have pain or stiffness or lack of power for a million different reasons. And we're just looking at this one aspect of the body. And as you said, the more we know, the more you realize you don't know. So this is one aspect of the body within my limited understanding, because brain research and neuroscience is very young. There's still tons of things that may turn out to be wrong that we think now. So basically, when we do the eye exercises in particular, because those are always the ones that people ask about, because we're training the body all the time, right? Why the discrimination? Why do we stop here? Face yoga and all the aesthetic stuff, of course, trains the face, which is super, super important, not just for aesthetics, but for our survival. Out of the 12 cranial nerves that come out of our brainstem, 4 of them are devoted to the eyes alone. And the brainstem is the part of the brain that's keeping us alive. So by doing these eye exercises, you are stimulating your brainstem, which is controlling all your autonomics, your digestion, your breathing, your heart rate, your blood pressure, your nervous system state in general, and so many other things. Also, there's neuroanatomical pathways to show that we usually draw in our courses with diagram to show how Your vertical eye movements can help activate the parts of the brain that control your posture. Your side horizontal eye movements, the fast switches, activate the opposing prefrontal cortex, which controls your cognition, your memory, your speech. So when we do assessments on people, it's really not just a Pilates assessment. It's an assessment on their brain by giving them questionnaires, asking them about their personality or their deficits in are they impulsive, are they clumsy, are they messy, or all these things is giving us clue. Okay, what can I do within my scope of practice as a movement professional? And that's what I try to emphasize a lot, to stick to our scope of practice as a movement professional. What can I take from neuroscience that would make me choose to do this on the left side of the body only, not the right, or make me choose to do this roll up from Pilates, for example, with the eyes in a specific position to activate that part of the brain without ever promising results, because you never know. It's all exploration, right? And if we use our language carefully and say this may improve this or this may make the move feel easier, then it becomes a little bit more free in our exploration.
Absolutely. And it's like one of the challenges, isn't it, around social media? I remember, not that long ago, it's like, Nick, put together a video, like 3 exercises that will get rid of your back pain. And it's like, well, there aren't 3 exercises that are going to get rid of your back pain, because that's what people want, don't they? They want to do this and you'll be, because then there's the hook, but it's not the reality. And that's why I'm passionate about this podcast and having conversations with people like you. We've got to, in our world, get our teachers and our clients to understand that, like we said before, we are beautifully complex people and species and animals on this planet. And let's not overly simplify it and say you're going to do this and this is going to be better. Pain comes for lots of different reasons. And like, we would never, as Pilates teachers, I hope, say, well, we're going to do this shoulder exercise and boom, you're going to have perfect posture or your shoulder's going to be fit. I don't think we would do that. So it's the same, isn't it? It's saying, well, what we can do is we can help you get more into balance with yourself. And maybe, like we said earlier, notice yourself more, notice more about what you like and what you don't like, and how you're feeling. That's always part of the beginning of my class. It's like, have a moment, tune in. What are you noticing? Because I don't think we're ever taught to tune in as people, are we? And notice and listen to what we want. And so it goes deeper, doesn't it? Just this art of movement. And I think through Pilates, like we said at the beginning of this chat, which is slower and it is more considered and it is more precision, we've got an opportunity to tap into getting our clients to understand themselves more. And I think we only do that if we don't simplify it to, well, you're like that because that left shoulder is lower than your right. That's not true. I might observe these, but as you've so beautifully said, that left shoulder could be like that for lots and lots of reasons. And it's really interesting how you've gone and explored extra tools to bring into, the movements themselves for Pilates are really powerful. But I love that lens. It's so exciting to think about, well, what else might this shoulder be telling us about what's going on with you? And combined with, like you said, your personality traits. I mean, that's fascinating. I'm going to have to come and do a course with you. I love the idea of that.
Yeah, I mean that's great, especially for private sessions, because people always ask me, "Oh, Neuro Pilates is it like this method?" I don't like to call it a method. It's not a method. It's a way of thinking, right? A way of looking at a different layer, like you just said, a different layer of the body, a different lens at the body in private sessions. In group classes, what I've tried to do for Neuro Pilates in terms of the course is to theme each class towards a different brain region. And obviously all the brain's working all the time. You're never just working the cerebral, but I would like to say theme the class in honor of that brain region. So for example, if it's a cerebellum class, we're really focusing on posture, coordination, balance, and extensor tone, because the cerebellum controls our extensors of the body. So there's a lot more extension in that class. And I really like the Leeds model of, I don't know if it's still the case there. I've not found it in Dubai, but people used to come in So Pilates, at least with the older ladies they had 7-week blocks. So in my head, I'm still thinking of that, the 7-week blocks, and each week we focus on a different part of the brain, and then it every class feels like a workshop, like a self learning about your own brain, about your own deficits. There's a little intro that the students have to learn how to say, short and snappy, without a long lecture about what this brain region is, what to expect from today's class. And then at the end, they're always given homework. If you felt like today's theme was difficult for you, like, do you feel this is a weakness in your brain, here's your homework, and everybody has to go away and do that.
I love that. I love how you can bring it in. I imagine even some of the eye work you can bring into how you use your eyes in extension and things like that. But also, it's a great tip, actually. I don't think the 7-week blocks exist. Well, maybe they do still in Leeds. I don't know. But even by a teacher who is teaching, like we have, students are members of our studio and they can come and go as they kind of please and see who they want. But you do tend to get a lot of regulars. And I think it's always a tip I give teachers is that when you make clients feel like they are part of an education piece, and I'm passionate about that. I'm not interested in the fitness part of this work. I mean, it is, of course it is. I'm like, I want to be an educator to my clients as well as I am to my teacher training students. It's like, how do I educate you? Because people like you, and how lucky am I that you were my first teacher? And I had Claire Sparrow as another one of my first teachers who were really passionate about education and the education you'd been on. And I think that's what changes clients' lives, is that you often, through the lens of Pilates, this pretty simple, slow thing that we all feel like now we feel like we know, we get to educate people on maybe why they keep having this disc issue, or why, not in a short-sighted way, but in an empowering way. People can think like, this is my lot. Like they have a belief system around their bad back. Like, this is who I am. And I think through the world of Pilates, we can often, it's not about saying your bad back is like this because X, Y, and Z, because we don't know that. Like, we're too complex to know the true answer, but we can empower them. And I think even through the lens of classes, we can be educating week on week. That gives clients a hook. And if they can be there next week and they're like, oh my God, that was so interesting. I had no idea that my brain did this, or I had no interest in, that this is how you weight bear efficiently, or whatever it is you might bring in as your little theme, they're going to want to come back to you, aren't they? I mean, it's how you have good business. I always joke that as a teacher, it's your business within my business, really, because you make the success of your sessions. So I think you're right. It is about giving people, making it feel as much like a course, even if it's not officially one.
Exactly. And making them feel part of that community where they're all kind of sharing with each other, which I think Claire does really well with her pelvic cafe and things like that. Like, all I remember that so well from before. I really remember it having an impact on me, the events that they used to do with the Leeds Pilates place when they had it, and just making everyone feel very together, sharing this love for this method. It was so special.
And that's kind of why I wanted to do this, because I think as the method has grown and more people are in it, I think it's nice, hopefully, that people can understand that there is still a real community. And even if we're doing it online, because you're in Dubai and I'm in Bristol in the UK, that we can still share ideas and be inspired. And actually, something that me and Claire were talking about, she was the first episode. If you've not listened, you can listen back to it. We were talking about how I think women can sort of historically have a bit of a scarcity mentality. I think that goes from our ancestors, like it's deep within us. And actually, there's a lot of women in this industry, and it's important actually that we share ideas and support and guidance. And how did you go? You said you'd been an educator in Leeds and you'd done a bit of somebody else's education. You then moved to Dubai. You've got all these ideas. You're passionate about what you do. Where did the education for Body Hack, which is your education provider, how did that come about?
Well, we started with the idea of, okay, Neuro Pilates needs to be our thing. All right. So I worked to do the accreditation, the paperwork and all that. And it was this long diploma, 1 year. They learned anatomy and physiology 1 month. The next month, and it was all in person, of course, anatomy and physiology. Then they come the following month for the Pilates mat work. Then they come for the following month for neuroanatomy. Then they come for the following month for Neuro Pilates. And then the following month for neural assessments and programming. Then pre and postnatal. Then injury. Like, I was crazy, right? So I thought that people could, in 1 year, get the whole, picture. And of course, realized after that first group, I mean, we were lucky actually, we had some really good people in that first group with experience, but it was clear the ones who didn't have experience, it was all too much. Like to learn neuroanatomy, you don't appreciate it. Yeah, you're learning it, but you don't really get it until you've been out in the field, knowing that there's more to biomechanics, that there's more, like, you can't just take my word for it, which is what was happening. You've got to go experience that there are limitations to looking at the body just biomechanically, and that you need to feel that and learn from your clients. Almost everything I learned was from the ladies, the older ladies I used to train in Leeds. I feel that. I feel like every time I talk about an injury or a condition, one of them pops in my head, and they just didn't have that. So then I learned, okay, we've got to split this up a bit, make them Pilates teachers first, plain and simple, and then add the neural options as an option afterwards for those who are interested in. And that worked out tremendously better. And as we were doing Pilates, personal training was super trending to become a personal trainer. All day long, we were getting calls because people couldn't see, they just saw fitness education under reps, right? And people couldn't see that it was Pilates only. So all day long, we were getting calls for personal training and fitness instructing. And then we thought, well, we have a great team. We were at that point freelancing, sending trainers to people's homes and stuff. So I did the application with Active IQ and everything and got the personal training. And that was what really took over our business. Like it was crazy. Like we had courses every month, so many numbers. It was a bit like Pilates now. To become a personal trainer was as trending as it is to become a Pilates instructor, at least here in the region, in the UAE. And then that kind of just spiraled on. And it's only since last year, maybe, that Pilates has taken over our PT business now. PT is a little bit less fashionable because the salaries are quite low still and in gyms. But the Pilates is what's really busy right now.
And so what is the education you do for Pilates? You talked about mat work. Do you do equipment work as well? What kind of trainings can you do with you?
Yeah, so we've got mat, reformer, Cadillac chair, barrel, everything. It pretty much the whole comprehensive. We got accreditation from PMA and reps.
And it's interesting because one of the challenges we have, I mean, it's a challenge all over the world, is around no official body for Pilates, no sort of official accreditation. In the UK, you've got the level threes, you've got SIMSA, you've got, and then in America, you've got the PMA, which I think is really the gold standard. It's when I wrote my course, I followed the PMA guidelines. For me, that just makes sense. And it's kind of how I had learned. But it is confusing, isn't it? But it's interesting for you, I guess, because I sit with this as an education provider. Should we go down and get PMA approval for our course? Because we've met the criteria. I think we could do it. It'd be pretty straightforward. But it's interesting, in the UK, people don't even know what that is. So you think, well, they're looking at other accreditations that, for example, level 3 doesn't exist for comprehensive. And the difference in level 3, it doesn't really mean anything. The PMA means something. I mean, I looked at those guidelines yesterday, even at what's in reformer and mat, and I'm thinking most courses I'm looking at that are level 3 are nowhere near that number of hours. So I imagine that was a good process for you to do that, to kind of understand what is needed.
We went through the exact same struggle because, I mean, here, especially, like, you have a lot of Brits. So the British care about that level 3 because I think it's still required in some places when they go back home. But then here we also have the whole world who care more about American accreditation for some reason, I'm not sure, than British. Right now, I'm on the PMA board for, like, a juror for the ITAP accreditation. It's a lot of hours that are required, and most of the trainings are just getting shorter and shorter. And I just don't understand how. I mean, ours is pretty long, and we still feel like it's a struggle to get the students to the level that we want them to be. But I just don't know how it's going to be with these courses getting shorter and shorter, and in the States becoming fully online, a lot of them. I hope that changes.
And that's, I think, why these conversations are important, because when I decided I needed a course, because I needed really good teachers. And I was Polestar Pilates trained, and I highly recommend them. They're fantastic. But they didn't want to come to Bristol, understandably. People didn't want to go to London. So, I wrote my own. That was like a year long of writing it. And I actually realized the things that were really important to me, a bit like you, different. But I realized there was things that I felt were missing from all the trainings that I'd seen and the teachers that we'd had work for us in the studio. And I realized the amount of CPD stuff I was doing with teachers who worked in my studios. I was like, I want to put this into a course. Last weekend, the lecture that weekend is around energy medicine. We're a business of energy, and let's understand that in more depth. And both from yourself as a practitioner, so you don't burn out, how you hold space for people, what's coming up for people. Like that felt for me really important. And there's lots of bits of that. But it is a confusing space, isn't it? It's confusing for clients coming in. This often comes up, the difference between fitness Pilates and more sort of traditional Pilates like we're talking about that has more depth to it. But definitely for trainee teachers, because I worked in this industry for a long time and I was still struggling to understand, what do I do with this course? And in the end, you realize a lot of the big players have no accreditation, actually. They follow the guidelines. And if you then want to go and do, a PMA exam, in the past, you could do that. I was looking at the ITAP guidelines yesterday, and, we do fulfill those. Where are you at with that? Because you are on the board. Are there conversations around trying to create some international players being able to get that accreditation?
They are trying, actually. I heard that Bazzi is going to get it just because at the moment, these big players have been around for so long, they don't feel they need to, understandably so. They've been around from the beginning, But at the same time, for standardization to occur, it is important that things don't get shorter and shorter and shorter, and not just shorter, but face-to-face being removed altogether, which I feel is impossible to create decent instructors from fully online. I know there's a lot of people who disagree with me on that, but I did try during COVID to do all Zoom, and I was very interactive and all of it, but still it wasn't the same standard of exams we were used to at the end of it. There are a lot of conversations for sure about the criteria, and it's always changing and becoming more rigorous, especially now that Pilates is gone a bit mental and there's teacher trainings popping up everywhere. But I do think one of the most important things you said is that I feel like the governing bodies need to be in so much constant communication with the studios and the gym for PT as well, like to know what are the deficits that you are seeing in the market itself, and how can we make it to enforce that this is happening, rather than education companies coming up with it, because they're not in the day-to-day seeing the struggle of interview after interview, and you're just seeing that this is hopeless, I can't find a good enough instructor, because they need to learn more about communication skills, for example, or all that stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, I have 4 modules on communication in my training, because it's not just the communication of queuing. That's one bit, but there's, how you welcome clients, like how you create an experience for them. And that was it. We'd set the bar because I had teachers like you, Heba. My studio's bar is set very high. Our clients expect this exceptional level of teachers who have such depth, who can create an experience and can go much deeper than just choreography. And that was fantastic. And that had been the success of our studio. It then became our challenge, because how on earth did we get new teachers in as we grew? Where do they come from? They need to go on long courses. That takes time. Then they still need to understand your ethos as a studio, and everyone's ethos is a little bit different, right? But I felt really passionate. Ours is a year-long course. And it is lovely seeing there's lots of people who come on our course and they often say, I chose your course because it was a year long. I didn't want to do 3 weekends. Hopefully, through some comms pieces and things we put out, people can kind of, I hope, make some educated decisions on, why would you choose that kind of course versus something else? How did you, as you started to go from, like you said, the first course that had too much in it, how did you sort of strip it back? Do you have any elements online? Is it all on person? How does a course work? And, you've done this several times now. What makes it work for you, do you think?
The standard Pilates diploma, what we feel is worked now is basically they do the anatomy and physiology online. That's all pre-recorded videos. But then, of course, for some people, having the discipline of even opening up the device is a challenge, right? And finding time for that. So 3 times a year, anatomy is offered in person for those who want to come in person. And then they do their Pilates mat work first, and then they do their hours and the observation practice and practice teaching for that. Then they do their reformer if they want to, but we have it's not a comprehensive like some schools. We have everything separate, so mat work on its own, which takes most students about 6 months to a year by the time they feel ready to finish their hours. You know how it is. Some people, they really take ages with those hours, and some do it shorter, and then they do reformer afterwards. Our biggest challenge now is because we've always had mat as a prerequisite to reformer, so it brings out much better instructors. But we were getting so many complaints about doing, I don't know how it is in the UK, but in Dubai, like reformer studios are popping up everywhere and there's no mat classes anymore. So people are saying, you're making me go through this 6 month thing, pay all this money, do all these hours, only to not find work at the end of it, just because you're telling me this is the foundation for what I really want to do, which is teach reformer. So now we've started this workshop, Intro to Pilates Mat, and allowing people to go to reformer. I'm still not on the fence about this. I'm still seeing what the kind of students are coming out. Some are really great, and it makes me think, oh, I'm glad we did that, because that person, they're shining so much as a Pilates reformer instructor, and they haven't done mat and they're amazing. But sadly, the majority still, it's like two worlds in the course. The ones who have done mat are somewhere, and the ones who haven't are somewhere else completely. So I still feel like we're probably going to go back to having it as a prerequisite. I promised myself to make a final decision by August about that.
It's hard, isn't it? Because, at the end of the day, your education is still a business and you're sort of looking at who you're competing against. And it's a bit like the people, like for me, I wrote a comprehensive course because fundamentally we needed comprehensive instructors at my studios. But I also noticed, to your point, that the comprehensively trained instructors were the best instructors. They were the busiest. And even if they only taught reformer, they were the busiest in that. They were fully booked for their private hours because the longer course allowed them to explore the depth of this work, to understand the difference of a group dynamic versus a private dynamic. But similar to you, I have had a lot of people say, would you please write a reformer course? And I'm sitting with it because I'm like, well, yeah, I'm thinking, well, you might as well just do it all in one. But I actually, where I've netted out is if I do it, I'm like, it needs to be reformer with mat. And I'm not saying it has to have the whole mat repertoire in it. But you can't teach reformer without mat. You can't teach reformer without mat because even the beginning of a class with some clock and some R marks and, there's lots of principles. And you can see in clients who've never done mat. Some clients come on our retreats who've only done reformer, and our retreats are mat because there's no reformers there. And they're like, oh, wow, this is quite humbling. And you're like, yes, you need to do a bit of both. We've got Soul at Home, so we try and encourage our members to do mat work at least at home so that they know it. Do you have any of your content online, like your lectures online, or is it all in person?
No, all theory is online, and all the moves as well. They've got the online platform, which they rely on for their hours that they've got to study from. They come use our space for the practice. And basically the neural units, of course, that's all done online because most of our signups are from overseas anyway. So pretty much all of that is online, but that's okay at that point because you've already got very experienced people who are doing Neuro Pilates. We hardly get any newbies deciding to do Neuro Pilates. So it's totally, that feels totally fine being fully online actually. But yeah, doing reformer fully online, I just can't imagine it. Like the amount of hands-on and the amount of in-person, like let's all look at this person and why would that spine be doing it this way? I don't know, it's so essential.
There's something about that in-person group dynamic where somebody asks a question and the richest content comes out from it because exactly like that, you're looking at something you just couldn't get that across. And we're an in-person discipline. So many times when trainees are doing practice and they're doing tactile cueing, it's like, by feeling what they're doing, you're like, it's too much or it's too little, or let's understand what makes a tactile cue feel really appropriate in a person's body. That, I'm not going to see that online or feel it and be able to guide you. It's just going to be more of a theoretical talk about tactile cueing, isn't it? So I'm with you. I think it has to be an in-person experience for sure. But it's interesting hearing how the theory, I've been debating this in my own course as well. Like, but will people watch it? Will they watch the lecture on communication and then will they still feel like they come, to the next weekend ready? But it's about how we scale as well and how much of, I'm sure you've had this challenge, Heba, have you? Like, there's only one of me and there's only one of you. You talked about this team. Have you got a team now of educators and where do you find these people from?
I'm waiting so much for this girl. She's coming from she's coming from London. She's just decided to move to Dubai. I'm apprehensively waiting for her to join our team. So it's really hard. I mean, we have a great team of freelancers, but they all have their own businesses. So it's really, really hard. Literally, since Pilates got popular, I've been teaching a course every single day since October, I think, like whether it's in Dubai or Saudi or Abu Dhabi or it's crazy. I'm so over flooded with the teaching, and then there's, of course, as you know, as a business owner, there's the admin, there's the million things to get back to at the end of the teaching day, and it's really really hard. So finding a team is not easy. PMA have very strict guidelines as well about that. They have to be comprehensive. Well, of course, a tutor, you'd want them to be comprehensive, but sometimes for certain accreditations, they need them to have been 5 years since being comprehensive to then teach, you know? So that 5 year rule, it makes things extremely difficult to happen to find a comprehensive teacher who's been certified already comprehensive 5 years, who isn't already super busy with their own business, is impossible almost. So I find.
Yeah, I can absolutely imagine that. And so you then made the transition to, like you said, to this is your business now. You're running courses almost every day of the week. That's interesting to sort of see how busy, like you said, not just in Pilates, but in your personal training as well. Was that a transition from not just running these weekend courses? I'm guessing do you work with certain studios and run it in their studios? Is it always the same studios that you have relationships with?
Yeah, we have certain studios that we run the courses at. Now that the numbers are so big, before we used to run everything in our space. Our space is just like a small space for the students to come do their hours in, you know. We're thinking now of going to a bigger kind of office to not rent so much, because it's a big expense constantly renting, not just for this course but that course, and it's all happening on the same time. And I mean, it's great for business that Pilates is trending so much, but at the same time it can also be worrying, like is it too much, and is it going to crash really fast? To be fair, with Pilates trending so much, the quality of student we're getting now is way better than we used to, because they're already obsessed with Pilates, which is fantastic. You know, you can really see a difference, especially those that come to the mat. In the past, we would often get students come and have never tried Pilates before. And yeah, that's our fault for the screening. But then now we're doing better screening.
I have to do a screening too. A comprehensive course when you've never been on a piece of equipment and done a few YouTube mats. But equally, I did my comprehensive course. I'd done a bit with you. I had done a bit with you, but I hadn't done lots. And I remember, it is a very humbling experience to suddenly, you think you're a good mover as the client, and then you turn up on the course and you go through the mechanics of, I don't know, a pelvic clock or like dead bug or something, and you're like, whoa, I did not know that's what that was about. I kind of still remember that first mat session of being, I can't actually do this. I just used to bang out a clock at the beginning of class and I had no idea what was really in it. And I mean, that's the point of the mat work being so important, because you need those pieces. It's an industry out there. It's interesting that you do PT. I'd love to hear how you kind of bring this into PT as well, because it's an industry. Pilates is never to be part of the fitness industry that celebrates that kind of beast mode, push yourself as hard as possible. Nothing good comes out of, like, you just have to do more and more, like that kind of boot camp mentality. How do you advocate for that more mindful approach? Do you bring it into the PT world as well?
Yeah, absolutely. We try to, because all of our tutors have done the neuro courses. So when you explain that precision from a neuroanatomical basis, which neuroanatomy now is much more common knowledge than it used to be. So when you talk about proprioception, when you talk about homunculus and the somatosensory cortex, most people know what that is already, thanks to social media and all of this. So it's not such a hard sell now to really make people take a step back and really look at their ABCs a little bit more. And, things like the FMS, a functional movement screen in the fitness industry, which is a movement assessment that's very integrated movement, like an overhead squat and an inline lunge and all this stuff. How can you assess someone's movement from something so complex, right? What are the culprits? You can't tell what the culprits are in this movie. It could be a million things, right? So I think it's so important for people to understand what are the deficits in this person in front of me. How can I assess them and how can I work with them? And I think it's easy to convince the trainers that it is important and not go hard. Like, yes, they know that that's what the clients want, but then they also know that they have a job to educate their clients.
Absolutely. And what advice would you give to any teachers, Pilates teachers, or I guess PTs or movement teachers out there that are looking to introduce and understand neuroscience into their teaching?
Just that it will absolutely rock their world, just to have a whole bunch of other options, possibilities, avenues to look at. For me personally, what really made a difference understanding the brain more and neuroscience more is how it affected how I raise my daughter, how it affected how I deal with my aging parents. We usually now just see neurons. I don't see people. I feel like that everything is a product of neuronal activity. So it makes you a much more compassionate person, a much more forgiving person, understanding person, and it makes you raise your kids very differently, I feel, to not having that understanding. So it affects all aspects of life. I mean, my parents, as they get older and they're changing, they're fed up of me saying, oh, that's just because your brain and this is your brain. And they're just,
But I mean, it goes back to what we said right at the beginning of our conversation, didn't we? Like through something that we see as Pilates, like the depth of awareness that gives you, like you said, about people and their emotions and how they're feeling and how they're aging. I mean, I just love that. I just think, it's just amazing where this can go, really. You've talked about, you've got your education business, you've got a daughter, things are booming, you're in the Middle East. How do you prevent burnout? Do you prevent burnout? I always think it's hilarious that we're in the wellness space, but we're not immune to it. And I think it's important we share that.
yeah, I think it's the biggest battle to losing great instructors is the burnout. When I first moved to Dubai, I burnt out in the sense that I don't know when officially one burns out, but in the sense that I was getting sick all the time and started, and I usually never get cover unless I'm dying, but I was absolutely mortified that I had to get cover for several ones in a row. It was just one sickness after another, and it was all from overworking. I had to learn the hard way because I'm not good at delegating, and that's a weakness that I discovered in myself. How liberating delegating is when you do it. And when you just trust people, and even now, even if it's the smallest thing that I know I can do in 2 seconds, I know I don't want to get back into that habit. So I am sending, when someone's asking me about a course directly, before I used to just send them the information. But now I make sure I'm going to send your number to our salesperson and she's going to send you the info every time now. That's for me one of the most important things to prevent burnout because it keeps adding. And I wish I could do the same with the teaching, but at the moment I just can't find teachers. So I'm definitely close to burnout on the teaching side, but because I love it so much, it doesn't matter.
And the thing about delegating is it only works when you've got the right people. So where you can get people, and you're absolutely right, finding teachers who can run educate, it's tricky. I mean, it is tricky. You've been educating a long time. You've seen a lot of teachers go through your programs. You've worked in lots of studios. What do you think makes a good Pilates teacher?
Definitely the ones I think who have the best communication skills, as we were talking earlier. I think that's so, so key. Like the ability to command the room. One studio here asked me to do a teacher training for them, and I went in and I thought, this is a very different group of people. And I felt, wow, this is a very special group of people. I said, where did you find all these fantastic instructors? And they said, we picked them, they're performance people from London. They were chosen on their personality and their ability to command the room. And then they paid for their training to become bar instructors, to become Pilates instructors. So the studio had paid for me to come in and certify all these performers. And I thought, wow, like they're all so body aware, so good at communicating, so good. Cueing came like that. Like, after the face-to-face practicals, they were ready for exams, which never happens, right? They were ready even before they had to do any hours. So I think probably that, but at the same time, there's a fine balance, right? I know the performance people can sometimes make it all about themselves, and then in it becomes their show rather than the clients being the center. So I think mixed performer with sports coaches do really well. We've got some taekwondo coaches that teach Pilates as if they are teaching a taekwondo class. I feel like the this feeling of we're going to compete in this Pilates event, the instructor making the clients feel that they care that much, that we are going to compete in this Pilates event together and every detail matters and every one of you matters. That is so difficult to find nowadays. And I feel like that the burnout makes us autopilot in our teaching when we're teaching so many classes a day, especially now that Pilates is so popular. But if people can keep their passion and love alive for making sure that everybody, and if they think, they convince themselves there is a competition at the end of it, I think it would matter so much to how things are being taught. So yeah, performance and sports coach together. I didn't know Claire was a theater person, but she said it in your podcasts. And then I thought, now that makes perfect sense.
I see it through the students going through my program who are not performers, but they sometimes, they've got all this knowledge and then they're getting up in front of a class of 12 people. And this is a performance. And no matter how nervous you are, you have to perform and the show must go on. And it's a great analogy because it is a performance. And I've seen people whose technical knowledge isn't great, but they can create an experience for clients, and their classes are always busy. And I've seen the teachers who are so knowledgeable, but they can't communicate it. They can't get it across. They can't hold that space for people. So you're absolutely right. The performance element is such a big part of it, for sure.
Instinctively, not giving your back to the audience, or like going to fix someone's straps that are uneven, but making sure the whole room's taken care of. These things, I think, they'll add up.
Feeling that everyone is an individual in the class. I mean, they're the skills, aren't they? We have a closing tradition because we could talk forever, Heba. I'm loving this chat so much, Frank. We're going to go to the closing tradition of asking just some quick fire questions. So the first one is, what was the most influential piece of advice you've been given and by who? And this could be Pilates or not Pilates.
To find out what is unique about you and amplify that. Because at the beginning, when I was teaching, I was trying to copy my mentors or sound like that instructor that I loved so much, or that instructor. And even my sister came to my class and she said, it was a great class, but you're not you. Like, who is this person? Who is this American teaching? Obviously, in the beginning, we need that. But then to find out what was unique about me and just amplify that to the maximum, I think that was great advice given to me by one of my mentors.
That is such great advice. I say to the teachers in my studio, when you do cover, it's very easy, especially if you're a newer teacher, to feel like you go and watch that person and you're like, well, I better deliver a class like they do because I'm covering. And I'm like, you'll go wrong. You have to be unapologetically you. Teach your class and you'll teach it well. And they might prefer that other teacher's style, but they'll still think you did a good job. Whereas when you try and be somebody else, and you're right, at the beginning, you have to be a bit of a sponge, but then, you find your way. So what mentors have shaped your life?
Dr. Eric Cobb, definitely biggest one, I think, from Z Health Performance. He's just a amazing presenter, and I always strive to be as good a presenter as he was. I remember asking him, what's the secret to becoming a great presenter? And he said, it's just reps. And I didn't believe him at the time. I said, there's no way you can get this good at teaching just from repetition. But then you realize everything's just reps, and they've got a great model of how to get people's attention and stuff. So Dr. Eric Cobb definitely number one, and then of course, mentors. I don't know, really, I learned the most from the clients, especially the ones in Leeds, because they were older. Since I moved to Dubai, I'm dealing with a much younger clients. In Leeds, literally every client with their condition is what taught me so much about degenerative diseases and spine issues and joint issues, all of that stuff. I feel the clients are the biggest mentors. And there's a few Pilates ones as well that I really learned so much from.
Yeah, I mean, you're so right about the clients. That's where your learning begins, when you work with real clients, with real stuff. Often when they've got themselves into a bit of a pickle, they're more open to trying, like you said, different things. They're like, okay, if you could go back in time and give your younger self some advice, what would that be?
To maybe not try to be perfect, just to roll with it. You've got to not wait for things to be perfect before you action them, but actually just put yourself in the discomfort and then do it and finish things. I've started so many things that I never finished. So
And what has been the most profound gift that Pilates has given you?
definitely after having a kid is when I really appreciated it so much more. So in the beginning with the synchro, but then again with the postpartum journey, I just couldn't believe how much I needed just that. I just feel like it moves you from the inside and cleans up everybody's movement like nothing else.
And Heba, if people are listening and they want to work with you, how can they find out more about you and what you do?
Just through Body Hack Official is our Instagram account for the company for the courses. Neuro Pilates is a bit more of a personal account, so you're more than welcome to message me on there. And then our website is www.bodyhack.co, and it's got all the courses on there. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Oh, thank you. I've just taken away so much from today's conversation. So I'm so grateful that you could join me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nick. It was so great to catch up.
I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. I'm really grateful that you're here and I'm loving building this community with you all. Make sure you click the follow button so you don't miss an episode. New ones come out every Monday. And if you found today's content helpful, it would mean a lot if you left a 5-star review or even better, shared it with someone you think would enjoy it too. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you next week.